Hello and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. About 4 years ago, I had a friend tell me about a writer named John Vaillant, V-A-I-L-L-A-N-T, and he'd written a book called The Golden Spruce. I was told by another friend just a few months ago about another book, the fourth book that John Vaillant has published, and it was called Fire Weather. I was curious about this book in particular, and went to the public library, checked online, and saw that the library had maybe a dozen copies, and there were maybe 18 or so people wanting to get the book. So I put a request in for it. A little while later, got a notice that it was in, went and picked it up. Unfortunately picked it up with a number of other books, and I haven't finished reading it, but it's due back today. So what I'm going to do is try to maybe share the book in installments. Now, is this book popular? Well, when I checked today, the library now has 34 copies of it, and there's 158 people on the wait list for it. So like a reaction, like a fire, news about this book is spread, and so I'm wanting to feature it in this video. The subtitle is called The Making of a Beast. Now, when I opened the book, almost the very first page was a map, and I thought I'd share it with you. This is a map of northern North America. Okay, so we're going back up north, the polar regions. Well, how far north are we going here? This is the 49th parallel, Montana, Idaho, Washington, British Columbia, the Rocky Mountains, Calgary, much further north than Calgary, Edmonton, much further north than Edmonton, Fort McMurray, and area of the fire is shown in this amoeba-like creature outside the town. Whoa. Now, next page was another map. This shows Fort McMurray, so that when he speaks about places, one can check. Part 1, origin stories. Now, there's 3 parts to the book. I've only read the first part. In fact, finished it within the hour. And this is, in this great chain of causes and effects, no single fact can be considered in isolation. This was a quote by Alexander von Humboldt, who was a scientist, a marine biologist. His name was given to the current that runs up the western side of South America, the Humboldt Current. Gets up to the equator and turns, and the southern hemisphere cycle, and the great chain of causes and effects. No single fact can be considered in isolation. Yeah, it's, well, it could almost be a definition for ecology. That chain of causes and effects. Well, don't need to belabor that point. Okay. I said this was cold. This was northern. Here gives you a better example of it. Unappreciated by most of us down south is the fact that all of this, man and machine alike, must function year-round, 24 hours a day, so it's going continuously, across some of the world's most extreme temperature fluctuations. Untreated diesel fuel begins to gel at -9 degrees, and bulldozer blades can shatter at -37 degrees Celsius. But Fort McMurray sees temperatures in the -40s every winter and has posted lows in the -50s. I seem to remember at that point, if you were to spit, it would freeze before it got to the ground. The fire department's pumper trucks have built-in heaters to keep the water from freezing en route to a call. And yet, with increasing regularity, the region is seeing summer highs in the 30s. That's 30 degrees Celsius. Extremes like this put terrific stress not just on metals, but also on hydraulic hoses, lubricated gears, and any fluid that must be kept flowing in a consistent viscosity. Of course, it is particularly tough on human beings. Every plant has dedicated crews who do nothing but build scaffolding, often outside and in all weathers. There, a 5-knot zephyr will make -25 degrees Celsius, a routine winter temperature in Fort McMurray, feel like -40 degrees, a temperature at which exposed flesh and eyeballs freeze in minutes. So that's winter, the north. What they're mining is something called bitumen, and it's not in a liquid state. One way to measure the value and desirability of a fuel is to calculate its energy return on investment, or EROI, energy return on investment. Conventional fuels like crude oil or natural gas have high EROI ratings, generating close to 30 units of energy for every unit of energy used to extract them. 30 to 1. Alberta bitumen has an EROI of about 6 to 1 for surface mining and 3 to 1 for steam-assisted gravity drainage, ratios so marginal that no conventional petroleum producer would consider them. So it's got to be non-conventional. Alberta has taken these liabilities into account in order for the bitumen industry to be even remotely profitable. 4 conditions must be met. Conventional oil must be trading above $50 a barrel. If it was less, no one would even consider the bitumen. The natural resources needed to produce it, fresh water, natural gas, and the boreal forest ecosystem must be had for next to nothing. Well, that's what they've been given. The industry itself must be heavily subsidized, and exploration costs must be nil. There is a fifth condition: exploited not just by the bitumen industry, but by the entire burning world. No consequences for emissions. So what we're doing to the air and the atmosphere, there shouldn't be any charges or fines levied. Now, just as a contrast here, Saudi Arabia can break even at $5 a barrel. At $5 a barrel, it can break even. So at $10 a barrel, it's still making, whereas this is so perverse, perhaps might be a word, I don't know. The next chapter is takes a look at chapter 3 at commercial enterprises in this huge northern tundra-like area. And so it comes to mind that in Canada, Alexander Mackenzie was legendary. He was an explorer, he was a navigator, and a fur trader. He actually was the first European to cross the continental overland, arriving at the Pacific coast in 1793, 12 years before Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Now, he kept meticulous records for the Northwest Company, and which this was before they were absorbed by the Hudson Bay Company. So in 1798, Mackenzie reported a staggering annual take of 106,000 beaver pelts, 32,000 marten pelts, 6,000 lynx, 3,800 wolves, 2,100 bears, and 500 wood bison, among many other species. Now, in this same chapter, he looks at the history of crude oil. And let's see. He's I don't want to talk about what it did to the whale industry, but that was one good thing. One good thing with the oil is that it made it unprofitable for whaling. I guess there's a plus side to just about everything. Now, this is something about pet coke. Since 2010, pet coke, along with the terrific pollution it generates, has become one of North America's biggest exports. In 2016 alone, 8 million metric tons was shipped to India, where environmental regulations are poorly enforced, a fact borne out by the lethally toxic state of the country's air. In 2018, China imported more than 7 million tons. Japan and Mexico's import even more. In total, the United States exports roughly 90 million tons of pet coke a year. And much of this is derived from Alberta bitumen. Now, kerosene, it talks about once in a great while, there would be a direct hit. Now, this is in Alberta, and people were drilling for oil, not just in the north that we're looking at, but further south, south of Calgary. Every so often, they would hit oil. But here's one that was 80 miles upstream from Fort McMurray. It was in the summer of 1897. Drillers with the Geological Survey of Canada hit a void at 800 feet, releasing a spectacular jet of methane, natural gas, peppered with walnut-sized chunks of iron pyrite that blasted skyward at the speed of bullets. The sound, something like a jet fighter, was audible 3 miles away. The well was estimated to be producing more than 8 million cubic feet of gas per day, enough to heat every house and building in modern Fort McMurray. But in 1897, with no place to sell it, no way to capture it, and no way to put this explosive genie back in the bottle, the drillers did the next best thing. They lit it on fire. Before being finally capped, it burned intermittently for 21 years. A blast furnace in the wilderness, roaring like a jet booster day and night, winter and summer, while the great river froze and thawed, and the low sun wheeled. The northern lights shimmered, and passing hunters marveled and warmed their hands. Subsidies. Now, it appears as though all of these gas and oil people can't survive without taxpayers' subsidies. So here's what it says. This is according to the 2019 International Monetary Fund report. Canadian taxpayers contributed more than 40 billion US dollars in subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. In 2015 alone, approximately $1,200 for every man, woman, and child in Canada. In the same year, Americans contributed more than $2,000 per person, while China, a nation of 1.4 billion citizens, contributed an equivalent of $1,025 per person to support the fossil fuel industry. Whew. Then gives a little report on a Dingman well that was in Turner Valley, Alberta. I had a good friend, he and his wife lived in, friends I should say, lived in Turner Valley. I guess depending on which way the wind was blowing, they would smell the refinery there. It could be pretty bad, they said. Chapter 4 is on working conditions. I could call it living conditions, but that would be a question mark at the tar sands, because what he relates here in that 4th chapter is not a very pleasant story. Many people have gone there out of work, fishermen in Newfoundland, others, and they go there and there's great incentive to work overtime. Some of them will work a 20-hour shift on consecutive days, 4 days on. What does that do to the body? And So that was quite a chapter. And the next chapter, chapter 5, was on man and his relationship with fire, the history of that. Quite fascinating. And I finished. I know right where I can start when I get this book again. I'll go put my hold in and on as after I walk to the library and return this book and some others, 5 others. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.